Good evening, buenas noches, and thank you for tuning in. On behalf of all of us at the locally based, independently owned bookstore, Books and Books in Miami, Florida, and in partnership with Miami Book Fair, it's my pleasure to welcome you to a virtual evening with Brandon Webb to discuss Steal Fear, a thriller, published by our friends at Bantam Books. Brandon Webb is the New York Times best-selling author of The Red Circle and Benghazi, The Definitive Report. A former U.S. Navy SEAL whose last assignment was course manager for the Elite SEAL Sniper course, he was instrumental in developing new curricula that trained some of the most accomplished snipers of the 21st century. Brandon has received numerous distinguished service awards, including the Presidential Unit Citation and the Navy Commendation Medal, with a V for Valor for his platoon's deployment to Afghanistan following the September 11th attacks. To moderate tonight's conversation, we're joined by John David Mann, the co-author of more than 30 books, including 4 New York Times bestsellers and 5 national bestsellers. His writing has won multiple awards, including the Living Now Book Awards Evergreen Medal for its contributions to positive global change. Throughout this evening's broadcast, you're invited to ask questions by using the Ask a Question feature at the bottom of the screen, and you can order your copy of Steal Fear from Books and Books below by pressing the green button. We have signed book plates to go with those books, so order immediately. We really appreciate each and every order and the generous donations from viewers everywhere. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests to the virtual stage. Hello.
Thank you for the great introduction.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Christina. Yeah, good to be here. Great to be here at Books and Books.
Yeah, love Books and Books.
I tweeted this out today, but indie bookstores are they are the heroes of our business. So we love indies, and here we are.
Yeah, 100%. So John and I talked earlier, and we wanted to, I think, kick it off, maybe share how we first met, and tell that story, which is, God, what is that, 10 plus years now, John?
It's over a decade, yeah.
But you want to kick it off? And
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah. It was in 2009, April 2009. Everybody in the country, everybody in the world, I guess, was glued to their TV sets because these Somalian pirates had taken over the Maersk, the ship that was piloted by Captain Phillips. Captain Phillips was not Tom Hanks yet. He was just Captain Phillips. And we all watched as 3 Navy SEAL snipers took out those 3 Somalian pirates in coordinated shots, like synchronized swimmers. I mean, and it was like hypnotic. And everybody who didn't know, who had never heard of Navy SEALs yet, was at that point going, "What the hell are these people? What's going on? What is this?" And my literary agent at the time was sitting at home watching this on her television set and turned to her sister and said, "I want that guy as a client." She was watching CNN as they interviewed a guy who had trained Navy SEAL snipers, who had helped design that course and co-taught the course that trained these 3 Navy SEAL snipers. And she said, "I want that guy as a client." 3 days later, that guy walked into her office and said, "I need an agent." And that guy was Brandon, who wanted to have a representation for his memoir. And they contacted me and said, this guy has got a memoir that's quite a story to tell. Are you interested in participating in co-writing with him? And I said, wild horses couldn't drag me away. We've been writing ever since.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, and look, just for the audience, it's 1 a.m. here in Zurich, so I'm doing my best to be as chipper as possible. I remember John and I finishing The Red Circle, and I kind of tossed out this idea. I said, when I was on before I was a Navy SEAL, I was a search and rescue swimmer on the Abraham Lincoln, it's an aircraft carrier. And we had this incident on the ship where they just integrated women into the crew, and we had a sexual predator on my deployment, and we never caught him. And it just planted this seed, like, what if this was a serial killer. And I remember asking John back then, like, does this seem like something you're interested in? But I hadn't even thought about writing a novel, and I think both of us, from the nonfiction world, it was a little bit strange, but it's just something that I think maybe you can add to it, John. But I just kind of planted that seed a decade ago, and I just kept hounding you every so often. But that's kind of how this year came about.
It's a weird thing because, at the time I was a published writer, and I had published quite a few books, and I'd published many more since then, but they've all been in the nonfiction world. I hadn't published any short stories. I hadn't published any novels. It was all nonfiction. And for the next 10 years after we talked about this, I was already a big mystery fan. I was a big crime book fan, but for the last decade, it's been weird because I've been writing nonfiction books, and all I've read is current crime novels. I've been just stuffing my brain full of the best crime writing, from Raymond Chandler to Lee Child, everybody in between. And we both knew we wanted to do this story. It was a unique story. It was both because it was based sort of or inspired by real events. There weren't actual murders on Brandon's ship, but it was inspired by real events. And also it was a military book, but it was also a murder mystery. So it was kind of like two genres smashed together, and a thriller. And writing a thriller, we discovered, is very, very different from anything we'd done before. So it took us a decade really before we could carve out the time and sit down and do it. It took us over 2 years to get that first book written. I say first book because it's the first of a series, and we're working on number 2 now. But yeah, so it's Steel Fear is a decade in the making if you count from when we first talked about it, but it's really 25 years in the making if you count from when these events first happened on the decks of the Abraham Lincoln, the USS Abraham Lincoln. And here it is. Here it is.
Yeah, I would say probably the biggest challenge that I saw with the project was how do we describe this complex aircraft carrier environment, which is a floating city, because it's very hard to describe that to somebody in a few words. And we were lucky enough to get John a visit on the Abraham Lincoln in Virginia Beach, and I think one of the biggest challenges of this closed door murder mystery was describing this carrier environment in a way that is technically correct, but also not over the reader's head, right? So I don't know if you have anything to add on that, John, because I think you did an incredible job really, building that world in a way that the reader could buy in and understand it.
Yeah, for me, I don't know how it is for other writers, but for me, there's always this time, before, at the beginning of writing a book, nonfiction, fiction, any kind of book, where there's this period where you've got a lump of clay and you're not sure what you're going to make out of this clay, and you've got some vague ideas, but it's still kind of coalescing. You're not really writing yet. And in that early period, I was intrigued with the idea of the serial killer and the Navy. There's a Navy SEAL who's got kind of a very shadowy background, and he's a very troubled guy, very traumatic past, and he's suddenly dropped in this ship, and it's kind of his job to figure out what's going on. The story intrigued me, but it was when I started looking into the aircraft carrier, because I had to describe it, and I suddenly realized, man, this environment is so much more than I ever imagined, and it's so foreign, it's so alien and strange that pretty quickly we came to the point where we said, the aircraft carrier has to sort of be a character, has to be like a central character in the book. You got a hero, you got a killer, you got a captain, you got various people, but the carrier is so strange that we had to write about it as much as if it were a main character. And the challenge of it is, it doesn't look that big from the outside. It's a boat. But when you get inside, you realize it's not a boat, it's a city. It's like if you take the Empire State Building and lie it on its side, it's about the same length. roughly, and you got 6,000 people jammed into this steel tube that shot through with miles and miles and miles, like over 20 miles of corridors that all go all kinds of which way, like an ant farm in 3D. And then you stick them on the ocean for 6 months. and you've mixed men and women that we have not done in previous generations. It's a wild, wild environment. So that was really both the big challenge of the book and also a lot of the joy of the book, is describing that in a way that the reader can really grasp it.
Good stuff. Also, I did want to make sure people that are tuned in know that a lot of, not only is the kind of plot based on real events, but a lot of the characters are based on real characters that John and I have written about in over a decade, including the CEO of the Abraham Lincoln, which is Eagleburg and Steel Fear. But this was a captain that, for all intents and purposes, wasn't a very good leader when I was on the boat, didn't talk to the crew. And this just created this environment where this sexual predator could thrive and scare the hell out of everyone, all the women on the ship. So it's interesting. I don't know if you have any comments on that, John, just how we're able to incorporate multiple characters based off real people. And kind of, one of the things when I was on James Altucher's podcast last week, he said to me, he's like, this is a leadership lesson. Like, you could teach a leadership course off of Steel Fear. Yeah. And it's just like good leadership, bad leadership. But I don't know if you have any comments on that before we open it up to Q&A.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the great pleasures, one of the great joys of writing a novel, and again, this is our first novel, so I'm speaking like I have lots of experience. I have one experience so far, but one of the great joys is, of course, is creating these characters. And yes, it's a novel, so you can make up whatever you want, but also it has to grip the reader. It has to feel real. It has to be real. Something my mom taught me when I was a kid is that great fiction is like more real than reality. That's why it grabs us so much. It resonates with our lives because there's so much going on there that not only feels real, it echoes experiences that we've had, people we've known, and even challenges that we face in our own lives. So it's almost like a tool for living if it's well done. So in Steel Fear, we go the whole gamut, all the way from characters who are very much drawn from real life. Like Brandon mentioned, this dysfunctional captain. There's also a magnificent captain that doesn't actually show up on the ship, but he's in the main character's memory. A lot of flashbacks of this wonderful captain who is exactly based on another captain that Brandon had on a different deployment. There's the hero has a best friend who's also in his memories that is kind of a significant character, who's based on Glenn Doherty, who was Brandon's real life best friend, one of the 4 who was killed in the attack on the compound in Benghazi in 2012, which was a really meaningful story, obviously to Brandon, but to both of us. We wrote about it in one of our books, and Glenn was just a huge part of Brandon's life. And so that kind of gives some extra flavor to some of these characters. One day, there's a chief on the ship. I'll just mention this one too. There's a master chief, the command master chief. He's actually the top enlisted man on the entire boat. So he has enormous authority and responsibility. His name is Robbie Jackson, Command Master Chief Robbie Jackson. This big, like, tank of a guy from Louisiana. And one day when Brandon and I were talking, he mentioned a chief he had once who would chew tobacco. He's having a cup of coffee and he's chewing tobacco, and he'd spit the tobacco juice into the coffee cup. Then a few minutes later, takes a sip out of the coffee cup. And he was like the kind of guy who chews nails, right, for breakfast. And that image struck me so much. This is just like a conversation we had on the phone. That's what went into Jackson. Just that. That's it. That little 2-minute story. Everything else about Jackson we just made up out of the air. But so you have these like inspirations from real life, whether they're fragmentary or they're an entire biography that help make the thing come to life. pretty much everybody you read in Steal Fear is in some way an echo of someone we've known.
So I'm reading, looks like we got a books and books question, but can you tell us a little bit about your writing process? How do you write together? You know, in this case, what John, I had pitched over about 15,000 words to you, which is kind of the seeds of the story. And, you know, hounded you for a few years of like, can you help me get this done? And I think, I mean, God, we've written so many books together, but I don't think we've really defined a process, but we're kind of settling into how we work together. But I don't know if you have any comments on that, John. Like,
sure.
By the way, I just finished that cemetery scene for Cold Fear.
Oh, far out. Awesome.
Fun with that one. It's dark.
Cool. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, we're working on the second book in the series now, the follow-up to Steal Fear. And I pitched to Brandon an email, said, I got the scene, you know, would you sit in the cemetery and here's kind of what happens. I said, can you draft this up for me? So I can't wait to see what you got. So yeah, the process is really interesting. In the case of, we've done several military memoirs. One is The Red Circle, which is Brandon's life story. We've done a few other memoir books, which are stories of people he's known, all SEAL-based, people he's known. And in all those cases, I'm kind of mining real people's lives. I'll sit and just do interviews and interviews and interviews and interviews. And that's all raw material that goes into growing this memoir, this real story. In the case of Steal Fear, yeah, it's fictional. It's a made-up story, but it's kind of the same in a way. Brandon had this framework, the setup on the aircraft carrier, the serial predator, who for our book is a serial killer. And as he says, he had 12, 15,000 words sketched out of a start of a story. A couple characters, a setup, some developments, and he sent me that. And so from there, I just got on the phone with him and mined him and mined him and mined him. By that time, we were 10 years in, so I knew so much about Brandon's life. There are a lot of experiences that happened on the boat that reflect experiences that have happened in his life. There's a helicopter crash that happened before the book begins, but it's a very significant event that comes through the book. And that is that's an echo of a real event that happened that we described in The Red Circle, where Brandon was one of 4 on a helicopter that almost had a fatal crash. If it had a fatal crash, we wouldn't be here. There'd be no Steal Fear. But thankfully, it was literally pulled out at the last second. But that experience, which I already knew before we began, that colored the book. So a lot of the stuff I just drew from Brandon, and then I'd draft something and I'd shoot it to him and say, what do you think? How would we do this? How would they do that? And he would come back and adjust things and say, hey, you know what? Sometimes we have this like telegraphic communication, where I'll send me an email saying, I'll give him like an email this long. It says, can you answer this? And he shoots back like 2 lines. And I'm like, oh, wow, got it. Okay. And I know his story so well that those 2 lines make like pages just come to life. So it's, yeah, we have that kind of back and forth. I guess it's a process. Yeah, that's our process.
I mean, I would say, like, from my perspective, especially with Cold Fear, like, John is definitely the point man. Like, I have input on plot, attention to detail, authenticity, and I'm asking for more and more responsibility on the writing stuff. So John, you send me over a few scenes to write as well, but yeah, I mean, it's just a collaboration. And I think for me, what makes our partnership work is, we both know that we're good at certain things, and we have, our strengths and weaknesses, and there's no egos involved, and we just want to make good product. And that, I think that's fundamentally what drives the process. And yeah, I'm excited about it. I think we have a great book in Steal Fear, and it's something we spoke about before this too. It's like cross genre It's not just a military thriller. I don't know if you want to talk about that a bit.
Sure. Hey, are we anything like a sniper and spotter? Like I'm the sniper and you're the spotter? Is that how we are? I get to be the sniper in this case. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, you're the sniper.
My spotter. He says, a few angles to the left, a few degrees to the left, a hold for wind. Okay. So, the cross genres is interesting because, maybe those of you listening right now that we have probably some military people in our audience, and I'm sure some non-military people in our audience. We knew from the start, this is for both groups. This is for people who know the military and who love to follow military fiction, Brandon was a huge fan of military fiction all his life. But it's also for people who, love to read Robert Crayson, Lee Child, and, all kinds of just straight old thriller, civilian. I know Jack Reacher has an Army background, but it's a civilian book. So the challenge of that is we've got to explain the military aspect thoroughly enough, like the jargon, the hierarchy of authority, the pecking order, the chain of command, the procedures. Things are so different in the culture of an aircraft carrier, so different than in the culture of a city or a town. We have to make all that clear, otherwise it doesn't make any sense. But we can't be loading all kinds of information on you and boring the hell out of you. It's like the story has to move, right? So we have to really take care of the non-military audience and make sure that we bring you along. But we can't bore the military audience. Not only that, we can't get anything wrong because military readers are just monsters, man. It's like if you get anything wrong, they are so on you. It's like I am never going to read this author again. He got the caliber of that bullet wrong. It's like you can't let your guard down for a second. So it's really a challenge straddling both genres. But it's also, I think for us, it's been one of the joys of the book.
Tonight I got a message from a guy named Luis Borges. He was one of the SAR swimmers in my squadron at HS6.
Oh, far out.
He's
really?
Like, I just ordered the book. He's like, I'm so excited. And then I got invited to this like SAR community, search and rescue swimmer community group on Facebook because of the book. Because they're like, wow, this is like, because I didn't really realize there's like a heavy search and rescue kind of helicopter crewman aspect to the story. So it's been pretty cool. And they're embracing us. So that's good stuff.
Just to make that clear, by the way, Brandon, I almost said Finn. You're not Finn. Brandon was, as you said, search and rescue helicopter crewman for some years before even getting on the SEAL track. He had a whole SEAL career after that. So he has these two different stages of his Navy career. We gave that same career to Finn, our SEAL in Steel Fear. So Finn started out as an SAR, as a search and rescue swimmer before he went in the SEAL track. Search and rescue is a really significant theme through the book. By the way, it also is in book 2. That's really cool. That's really cool to hear about that. It's neat.
Okay, I've got a couple more questions. Can Brandon tell us a little about his life story, how he grew up to be a SEAL, and get into writing books? So, the long answer is go read The Red Circle, which John and I wrote 10 years ago, because that's everything.
Tells it all.
Yeah, the short version is, I was born in Canada, hippie parents. My mom was American, dad was Canadian. My dad lost his business, decided to chase his dream and move the family onto a sailboat. And we did some cruising in Mexico, South Pacific. And essentially I was raised by hippies, parents. And my mom's still trying to figure out how the hell I found my way into the Navy SEAL teams. But that happened. Again, interesting part of the Red Circle is I led a fairly independent young teenage life, and was a stubborn kid. And my dad and I got in a big argument on a family sailing trip in Tahiti on our sailboat, and he told me to get off the boat. So kicked me out of the house at 16, came back to California, where I was working on a scuba diving boat out of Ventura Harbor, just north of Los Angeles, and always wanted to be a pilot, but realized my grades weren't great. I had this weird academic record, and ended up reading a book called Rogue Warrior, which was about the SEAL teams, and became fascinated and was like, okay, this is a way out for me. Not having money for college, I could join the Navy, have a shot at being a Navy SEAL and get my college paid for. So that's what got me into the SEAL teams. I was, as John said, a search and rescue swimmer before that. My second SEAL package was approved. I went through training, did just about a decade in the SEAL teams, then got out of the military really because I had a great time, but I just kind of burned out. I had a young family and got into entrepreneurship. My parents were entrepreneurs and kind of fell into writing as a form of therapy, really. I started writing some articles for magazines and started doing some different product reviews and ended up getting into blogging early. And then had this, my friend wrote Lone Survivor, and he said, wow, you have this interesting story, you should write a memoir. And that's kind of like, brings you up to speed with how John and I met with the Red Circle. But that's it. When I think what got me interested in writing was, it just was a creative outlet for me. As I said, very therapeutic outlet. And when I look back, not having a television and being forced to read books, and I was a huge D&D or Dungeons and Dragons nerd, and you have to invent stories in that world of Dungeons and Dragons. Like, you're inventing these stories with your friends and going on these adventures, and it's pure imagination. So I think that's kind of helped me along my journey as a writer, but still have a ton to learn, and just really fortunate and to work with somebody as talented as John, who makes me pull up my socks a little bit higher every day. But that's that question. Next one, which I'll pitch over to you, John. What are our hopes for the book, and have film rights been optioned?
Yeah, well, I mean, our hopes for the book are, first of all, that you'll read it. And then secondly, that you'll tell your friends if you liked it, and they'll read it too. I mean, we just have huge ambitions for the book. We'd like to see every fan of crime thrillers, every fan of murder mysteries, every fan of serial killer stories, every fan of military adventure, honestly, get their hands on the book and do with it what they will. I mean, if you don't like it, that's okay. If you love it, that's great. We just want to get it out there to as many people as we can. And yeah, the adaptation rights have sold, not for a feature film, but for a streaming TV series. We sold it to NBC Universal and Peacock, which is their streaming division. And it's in development right now as a potential streaming TV series. And we don't have an air date. We don't have a production schedule. It's all in the very early stages, but there's a phenomenal writer working on it right now and a fantastic producer. So we're really excited about that and really optimistic about it. And no, we have no idea who's going to play Finn before you ask.
Yeah, no, I'm excited about it too. And Ben Smith is our production partner. He's done all the Jason Bourne movies, and Aaron Rabin, the amazing screenwriter. So we're excited about it. And I think for me, this is an opportunity for us to build a meaningful franchise, like something that's really, really well done. And to be honest, it wasn't something that I thought we would just write this book that needed to come out that we've been talking about. But to John's credit, the Finn character came to life, and I think Ann Spire saw, our editor at Random House was like, you guys have a franchise on your hands here, and was really encouraging us to do a second book and carry on with the franchise. So pretty excited about that.
I hesitate to even say this because you don't want to get too highfalutin and too highbrow and too out there, but I think something else that we both want to do, I mean, we know each other pretty well at this point. something else that we both sought to do with this book is to at least touch on some sort of big issues. I don't mean big social issues necessarily, but like Brandon mentioned the thing about leadership, and Altucher is right. It's really like, I tell my leadership friends that it's a leadership parable disguised as a crime novel. And in a way it is, because it's really like, it isn't just the two captains. There are a whole number of characters who kind of represent leadership in all of its guises, great, awful, mediocre, and in between. And, we want to look at things like loyalty and things like revenge and things like guilt and things like trauma, and, and do something with them that has something meaningful. And like I said, that resonates for people and that has some kind of meaningful, impact in their lives. So that's our hope.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. We got another question. Any favorite authors that served as inspiration? So I'll let you take that one.
Oh yeah. Okay. I was going to say you should go first with that one because you got some. We both got some. Yeah. Sure, I will then. My Lee Childs was a huge inspiration for me, and it was absolutely surreal when we ended up with him giving us a cover quote for the book. It isn't like we knew him beforehand, so that was very, very cool. The Reacher books have been huge for me personally. The Bob Crace books, the Elvis Cole and Joe Pike novels have been huge for me. Raymond Chandler was huge for me when I started reading crime novels after Brandon invited me on board. And also Tana French and Kate Atkinson, both women, both UK writers, very literary kind of crime novels. They are probably my two most admired writers. And so that's my story. I'm sticking to it. Over to you. You got something too.
Yeah, I mean, especially for Steel Fear, I think I drew a lot of inspiration from Tom Clancy, Robert Ludlum. I love James Michener. Also, from the point on leadership, I love how Ayn Rand kind of tells this amazing story, but always weaves in this philosophical kind of viewpoint, which I thought we did well with Steel Fear. But those are kind of my inspiring authors. Also Steinbeck, like I love Steinbeck because he's such a just like no bullshit, no flowery words. It's just he's a plain talk, like, but amazing what he does with the simple words he uses, and then that's kind of something I always aspire to with my own style. But yeah, with Steel Fear, those are the big ones. I mean, I have many favorite authors, different genres, but as far as Steel Fear, plus the Hannibal series for sure was a influence, especially with the main character.
Yes. Does anybody eaten in Steel Fear? We won't say.
Yeah. But let's see.
On that note, Thomas Harris hangs out at Books and Books.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
Oh, fantastic!
So,
wow, we were in such good company. It's like we're in such good company. I can tell you.
You are, and I have to say that being raised by hippies on a sailboat and reading books, I mean, it works.
Yeah,
it really works out.
Yeah.
So what a great conversation. I mean, I love getting to know you better and, the background on everything that you've done. Congratulations. I mean, it's fantastic. I just want to remind anyone watching that if you have any last minute questions, you can still post them, and that you can order the book very easily by just pressing the green button, or if you're in Miami and you want to come by one of our stores, Brandon was there. He signed a lot of books. We have some of them left, and we've got book plates that we can also send out to you with the books. So I hope you'll come by. And I wonder if you would, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't do this to you at 1:30 in the morning, but
do it.
Yeah.
Man's been through SEAL training. Go ahead, Christina.
That's true. That's a good point. I wonder if you would read just a little bit for us from the book. Or
Got one handy?
I don't have one handy. I have.
Okay, then.
Yeah.
Hang on, I'll grab a book if you want.
Yeah, John.
Just to give us like a feel for the flavor.
By the way, as John's preparing, a very cool thing happened to both of us probably a few weeks before pub date. The guy that read the audiobook reached out to John and I and wrote us this incredible email just saying, look, I'm an actor and producer director. He's like, I've been doing audio for years and years. And he's like, I'm used to just doing the same old blah, blah, blah. And then I come along Steal Fear. He's like, this book is incredible. Like I had a blast reading it and it comes through in the audiobook. Like he does an incredible job on the audio read. So anyone that's into audiobooks, you're in for a treat.
Yeah, Jonathan McLean. Awesome reader. He read one of our earlier nonfiction books too. So yeah, I'll read something short, a couple paragraphs, and it's so the book opens with a character named Monica, who is a helicopter pilot, and we don't meet the central character of the story, Finn the SEAL, until the end of chapter 3. But we start out with Monica, who's a pilot on the ship. She's loosely based on a pilot named Mona, who was a friend of Brandon's on the Abraham Lincoln. That ship that Brandon served on back in the 90s, the Abraham Lincoln, is the same ship that I visited in 2019, is the same ship that the story is set on. So there's a lot of very similar realism is the word I'm looking for. So Monica is taking a flight out after midnight on a helicopter, co-piloting helicopter with her CO, her boss, who's a real jerk and who has it in for her, and she has no idea why. And they're ferrying out there in the Gulf, in the Persian Gulf, and they're ferrying out to Bahrain to pick up a passenger, a SEAL. And they have no idea. Nobody really knows why. They're going to go pick up the SEAL and bring it back onto the ship. And so they've been flying in silence for an hour with this kind of jerk of a captain. As the bird lowered to the tarmac, Monica spotted the two men walking toward them, illuminated by runway lights. Even from 100 feet off, she had zero trouble identifying the SEAL. He was tall, muscular, powerful, carried his fully loaded backpack as if it weighed no more than a paper boarding pass. He didn't stride so much as he loped, moving with a dangerous grace that made her think of the mountain lions she'd seen back home. Perfect specimen. Asshole. She hates SEALs, by the way. As they drew closer, she could make out the officer lagging behind the SEAL in his desert camis, lugging the other man's kit bag and gun case. This little guy was totally eclipsed by the SEAL, not just a head shorter, but almost a different species. Thin, wiry limbs, knobby joints, oversized eyes. He looks like a marsupial, she thought. In the Navy, rank was everything. Who outflew, outperformed, outlasted whom? And SEALs were a breed apart. This short, awkward-looking officer might technically outrank the big guy, but the big guy outclassed him in every other way. The contrast was almost comical. Marsupial, meet mountain lion. Stickman leaned out the door and shouted over the din of the rotors, "We're here for Chief Finn." The marsupial took the backpack from the mountain lion, stepped forward without a word, and boarded the helo. So this little thin, wiry guy, the marsupial that she thinks is totally outclassed, actually, that's Finn. That's our hero. He's the SEAL. And, one of the things that Brandon and I wanted to do from the start was take everybody's stereotype image of what a Navy SEAL is, the big, strapping, heroic, athletic god, and kind of turn it on his head and upset all those expectations. And so our hero is kind of an odd-looking guy. And from my perspective, the truth of it is that SEALs aren't, they go through this brutal training, and everybody's probably seen clips of their training in BUD/S. They're carrying logs and they're going through all this brutal obstacle courses. And yes, they're like physically kind of Supermen. That's all true. But what really distinguishes all the SEALs that I've talked with over the years in all of our books is intellectual. It's mental. It's more a mental state, an intellectual curiosity, and kind of a mindset than it is any kind of athletic physicality. I mean, Brandon, you should speak to that. You're one of those guys.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that, I mean, I get it all the time, right? I remember when I was on active duty, I'd go home for Thanksgiving and meet some friends of the family, like, oh, you don't look like a SEAL. I mean, yeah, I'm not. I don't look like Schwarzenegger on the Predator movie, but I think that those stereotypes is something that John and I wanted to, like you said, kind of rip apart, especially when it comes to performance and different gender roles in the Navy, which I think would surprise a lot of people. And that's why we felt it was important to kind of have some very strong roles for women and different genders. But yeah, I think we did a good job.
Yeah. It surprised some of our readers that, you know, there are 3 principal characters in the book, and you know, one of them is a female helicopter pilot, and the admiral of their ship is a woman, which happens in real life. There are now female admirals in the Navy, and so yeah, that was important to us.
Well, you're the only SEAL that I know personally, so, and I'm very honored to know you. So I just want to say congratulations on the book. It sounds really fascinating. I love that bit that you read, and it really kind of pulls you in. So I hope everyone who's joined us is going to, you know, want to get their hands on a copy. I want to thank you both for supporting indie bookstores, for being
Absolutely.
with us tonight, for lending us your time and your energy. Thank you so much. And I guess we will hopefully see you in person whenever you, you know, fly into Miami. That would be great.
You guys have a great setup. Like John and I would love to do I'm sure a live event with you guys soon.
We would love that. We would love that. So let's make that happen as soon as we can.
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you to everyone watching, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Bye.